This is Rally Round the Cannon, some thoughts on Princeton's history by somebody who should know better. Pepper Constable of the class of 1936 was a great Princetonian in virtually any sense you could conjure up. When football coach Fritz Kreisler was king of Princeton in the 1930s, Pepper was the crown prince. In a tweedy collegiate world of chads, chips, and cupes, he was the real deal. His name, honest to God, was W. Pepper Constable, Jr., a valuable runner on the 1933 undefeated national champion team that outscored its opposition 217-8. He was then captain of the again undefeated national champion team of 1935 and finished fourth in the Heisman Trophy balloting, the highest ever of any Tiger other than Dick Kazmaier, and he was drafted by the NFL. Pepper had other stews to season, however. A three-time president of his class and winner of the Pine Prize, he went to Harvard Med instead, served 4 years as a flight surgeon in World War II, then returned to practice for 20 years in Princeton, where he was chief of medicine at the medical center, a pillar of the growing community. So, it's exceedingly odd that nothing mentioned so far is likely to be his most important legacy to his alma mater. That he inadvertently accomplished in 1950, when he wooed and won the lively and athletic Elizabeth Howe. Who, you say? Well, you would know her best as Betty Constable, one of the true colossi of women's athletics in the United States, and therein lies our tale. The Howe family dominated the formative years of women's squash in the United States to the extent that Time magazine ran an article about it in 1959. This was before Betty had coached a minute of college squash. Her mother, Margaret, had been the national singles champion in the 1930s. Then after World War II, her twin daughters took over. Peggy, the younger finesse righty, won twice, and Betty, the elder bulldog lefty, won 5 times. The annual tournament among eastern cities that evolved into the National Women's Team Championship was christened the Howe Cup in recognition of the family's impact on the sport. When Princeton went co-ed in 1969, it fortuitously had in place the brand new Jadwin Gym Complex with wonderful facilities for possible women's varsity teams. After a couple years to plan, women's intercollegiate sports were launched in the fall of 1971. Since Betty Constable was hanging around town with Dr. Pepper, very sorry about that, and happy to coach, one of them was squash. 5 months later, in its first home match ever, the Tiger team, which included 6 women with less than a year's experience even holding a squash racket, beat a squad of Penn seniors 5-4. That same year, Constable sponsored and organized the college division of the Howe Cup as an intercollegiate women's team championship. The very next year, the Tigers won it with a roster including only 2 seniors and 1 junior. Thus, legend begat legend. It certainly seemed that Princeton in the early 1970s, with its century-long tradition of macho athletic fixation, and with notable recent successes in football, it had 4 Ivy championships in the 60s, and basketball with 8 in the 60s, plus an NCAA Final Four, might regard varsity sports as a sacred male province. That happened elsewhere in the Ivy League. But much to its credit, the opposite view prevailed, that a varsity team was a varsity team and they all deserved support, if not equal lineage in Sports Illustrated. There were 6 women's sports to begin with, and all of them thrived. Women's crew won the Eastern Sprints in its first season, with 1 senior and 1 junior rowing. By its 4th season, field hockey was undefeated. By their 4th season, the women's swimmers had a combined 27-3 record and 2 Eastern championships under their caps. The basketball team won the first 4 Ivy titles after the league began full competition in 1975. The tennis team, seemingly springing full-grown from the forehead of Zeus, won its first 39 dual matches and its first 10 Middle States Tournament championships. Betty Constable made all that look pedestrian. Her dual match record in 20 years as Tiger women's squash coach was 117 wins and 15 losses. The squad's longest losing streak during her tenure was 2, which only happened twice. 10 of her 20 teams were undefeated in dual matches, 12 of them won the Howe Cup, and thus the national championship. The U.S. Squash Hall of Fame opened for business in 2000. Its inaugural class included only 6 women, including Betty Constable. Her students, Wendy Zaharko, one of the original 1972 squad, and Nancy Gengler and Demer Holleran, among them, won 7 individual national titles. Constable's all-Ivy players are far too numerous to even list here. But she really gloried in taking women who had never seen a squash court and turning them into fiercely competitive national champion contenders on all the rungs of the Princeton ladder. In a very personal sense, she took Princeton's assertive male athletic history, of which her husband was a very integral part, and showed it to be sex blind. Whether your name happened to be Johnny Poe or Bill Bradley or Amy Knox, you could burn with competitive fire and carry the Tigers gonfalon with the very best. Even though she retired in 1991 and died in 2008, you can see Betty's influence today in sports she never played and students who never met her. As much as Fritz Kreisler, who once was called by President Harold Dodds the best teacher in the university, or Charlie Caldwell, or Pete Carrill, Betty Constable shows the upside of intercollegiate sports in a serious educational institution, far and above establishing that women are just as good at them as are men. Not for nothing did Pepper Constable win the Pine Prize. Yours in virtual orange and black, this is Gregg Lange of the great class of 1970. Rally Around the Cannon is a podcast from the Princeton Alumni Weekly online.